The Burglar's Ghost. I'm not a man known for flights of fancy. My 20 years on the Westford detective force have honed a practical, grounded approach to life, leaving little room for superstition. Yet, there was a time when I was utterly convinced that a ghost had aided me in my career, and the story, despite its incredulous reception, has always stuck with me. 18 years ago, as a young plainclothes officer, I was consumed by two ambitions: promotion, which was paramount for my aspirations, and marriage to Alice Moore, the most charming and intelligent woman in town. However, I knew promotion was the key, a necessary stepping stone to securing my future with Alice. I threw myself into my work, determined to distinguish myself and catch the eye of my superiors. One evening in late September 1873, I sat in my lodgings, contemplating my career trajectory. Westford was unusually quiet, and I half-heartedly wished for some dramatic incident to thrust me into the spotlight. As I pondered, a voice startled me. "Good evening, officer." I spun around, my lamp unlit in the fading daylight. A man sat near a chest of drawers, his chair positioned between the drawers and the door. He must have entered silently and taken a seat before speaking. "Good evening," I replied. "I didn't hear you come in." He chuckled, a low, almost mischievous sound. "No, I dare say not," he said. "I'm a very quiet sort, you might say. Noiseless. Just so." He was a solidly built man, his square face framed by a thick chin. His small, aggressive nose and beady eyes, shadowed by heavy brows, seemed to twinkle as he spoke. His attire reflected his personality. A rough woolen suit, a brightly colored scarf around his bull-like neck, and a fur cap he constantly twisted in his large hands. He sat there, smiling silently, making me distinctly uncomfortable. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to appear confident. "Just a little matter of business," he replied. "You should have gone to the office," I said. "We're not supposed to do business at home." "Right you are, Governor," he said. "But I wanted to see you. It's you that's got to do my job. If I'd seen the superintendent, he might have put someone else on it. That wouldn't have suited me. You see, officer, you're young and naturally eager for promotion, eh?" He was clearly trying to manipulate me, and I knew he had a motive. "What is it you want?" I pressed, trying to maintain my composure. "Aren't you eager to be promoted?" he persisted. "Aren't you now, officer?" I saw no reason to lie. "Yes, I am," I admitted, hoping it wouldn't be a mistake. "Ah," he said, with a satisfied smile. "I'm glad of that. It'll make you all the keener. Now, officer, you listen to me. I'm a-going to put you on to a nice little job." "Ah, I dessay you'll be a sergeant before long, you will. You'll be complimented and praised for your clever conduct in this here affair. Mark my words if you ain't." "Out with it," I said, feeling as though I was playing a game of cat and mouse. "You're going to split on some of your pals, I suppose, and you'll want a reward." He shook his head. "A reward," he said, "wouldn't be no use to me at all. No, not if it was £1,000. No, it ain't nothing to do with reward. But now, officer, did you ever hear of Light-Toed Jim?" Light-Toed Jim. His name was synonymous with audacious crime and clever thievery. He was a legend, a phantom figure, recently escaped from prison. His name sent a shiver down the spine of every police officer. "Light-Toed Jim," I repeated. "Why? What do you know about him?" He smiled and nodded. "Light-Toed Jim," he said, "is in Westford at this here identical moment. Listen to me, officer. Light-Toed Jim is a-going to crack a crib tonight. Said crib is the mansion of Miss Singleton, that 'ere rich old lady as lives out on the Mapleton Road. You know her. Awfully rich. with naught but women servants and animals about the place. There's some very valuable plate there. That's what Light-Toed Jim's after. He'll get in through the scullery window about 1 a.m., then he'll pass through the back and front kitchens and into the butler's pantry. Only it's a butleress, 'cause there ain't no men at all, and there he'll set to work on the safe. Some of his late pals in Portland give him the tip about this job. "How did you come to hear of it?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Never mind, Governor. You wouldn't understand. Now, I want you to be up there tonight and to nab Light-Toed Jim red-handed, so to speak. It'll mean promotion for you, and it'll suit me down to the ground. You want to be about and to watch him enter. Then follow him and dog him. And be armed, officer, for Jim will fight like a tiger if you don't draw his teeth first." "Now, look here, my man," I said. "This is all very well, but it's all irregular. You must just tell me who you are and how you come to be in Light-Toed Jim's secrets, and I'll put it down in black and white." I turned away to get my notepad. When I turned back, he was gone. The door was shut, but I hadn't heard any sound of it opening or closing. I rushed to the door, flung it open, and looked down the stairs. There was no one there. I ran downstairs and found my landlady, Mrs. Mariner, standing in the hallway with a friend. "Mrs. Mariner," I said, "which way did that man go who came downstairs just now?" Mrs. Mariner looked at me in bewilderment. "There ain't been no man come downstairs, Mr. Parker," she said. "Leastways, not this good 3/4 of an hour, which me and Mrs. Higgins here, as have come out to take an airing, her having been ironin' all this blessed day, has been standin' here all the time, and ain't never seen a soul." "Nonsense," I said. "A man came down from my room just now, the man you sent up 20 minutes since." Mrs. Mariner looked at me as though I had lost my mind. Mrs. Higgins sighed deeply. "Mr. Parker," said Mrs. Mariner, "sorry am I to say it, sir, but you're either intoxicated or else you're a-sickening for brain fever, sir. There ain't no person entered this door, in or out, for nigh onto an hour, as me and Mrs. Higgins here will take our Bible oaths on." I was baffled. I went upstairs and searched the surrounding rooms. There was no sign of him. He must have gone downstairs, but then the women must have seen him. There was only one door to the house. I was left with no explanation. I decided that if anyone was intoxicated, it was probably my landlady's. My visitor had vanished, and I decided not to report the matter to my superiors. I would handle it myself. If I could capture Light-Toed Jim, it would be a more impressive feat if I pulled it off independently. I made my plans and headed to Miss Singleton's house. I knew the housekeeper, a strong woman, who agreed to hide me in the room with the safe. If my informant was to be believed, I would soon have the opportunity to apprehend the notorious burglar. Shortly after midnight, I hid myself in a cupboard near the safe. I waited patiently, my mind filled with anticipation and a strange sense of unreality. Suddenly, I heard a faint creaking sound. My senses were on high alert. I peered through the opening in the cupboard door and saw the gleam of light through the keyhole of the pantry door. The door creaked open, and a man entered, carrying a lantern. As my eyes adjusted, I recognized the man I had seen earlier. It was Light-Toed Jim. He moved with a cool efficiency. He checked the windows, the cupboard door, and then locked the pantry door. He set his lantern on a chair and laid out his tools. He was a lean man, not particularly strong, but I knew he would fight if necessary. I planned to wait until his back was turned and then pounce on him. I had a good chance of catching him off guard. Soon, the moment came. He was engrossed in the safe. The faint sound of his drill drowned the click of my turning the cupboard door. I sprang forward, knocking the tool from his hand and throwing him to the ground. He struggled, trying to escape my grip. I reached for my handcuffs, but he pulled out a knife. He was trying to stab me. I managed to block the knife, but it slashed across my arm. I felt the warm blood. I grabbed a nearby drill and struck him on the head. He collapsed, unconscious. I quickly handcuffed him and secured his ankles. I was victorious. I was proud as I reported to the inspector. "Light-toed Jim? Nonsense, Parker," he said. But when I showed him the prisoner, he admitted that it was him. Exhausted, I went home to rest. I had a cut on my arm, but it wasn't serious. As I walked into my room, I saw my mysterious visitor sitting in my chair. He rose to his feet. I was stunned. "Well, Governor," he said, "I see you've done it. You've got him square and fair, I reckon." "Yes," I said. "Ah," he said, with a sigh of satisfaction. "Then I'm satisfied. Yes, I don't know as how there's aught more I could say. I reckon as how Light-Toed Jim and me is quits." I was determined to find out who this man was. "Sit down," I said. "There's a question or two I must ask you." I turned to get my coat, and when I turned back, he was gone. The door was still locked. I searched for him, but found nothing. He had disappeared again. I went to the office the next morning and found out that Light-Toed Jim wanted to see me. I went to his cell, and he was lying in bed. He was injured from the blow I had given him. He asked me how I had known about his plan. I told him it was a friend who had informed me, but Light-Toed Jim insisted he had no friends. I described my visitor to him. As I did, Light-Toed Jim's face went pale with fear. Yes, he said. "Why, it's Barksy Bill, as I palled with at one time. And what did he say? That he owed me a grudge? That we was quits at last? Right you are, 'cause he did owe me a grudge. I treated Bill very shabby indeed, and he swore solemn he'd have his revenge. Honey, Governor, what you see wasn't Barksy Bill at all, but his ghost, 'cause Barksy Bill's been dead and buried this 3 year. I was stunned. It seemed impossible, but I had been visited by a ghost. I continued to think about it, even after Light-Toed Jim was returned to prison. I often told the story to my colleagues, and I was often laughed at, but I knew that I had seen something extraordinary. My career flourished. I was promoted and eventually married to Alice. But the memory of the burglar's ghost lingered. It was a reminder of the strange and inexplicable events that could happen in a world that often seemed perfectly logical. 5 years later, I was traveling by train. I was shocked to see my mysterious visitor sitting in the carriage. He laughed when I stared at him in disbelief. "Hello, Governor," he said. "I see you knew me as soon as you come in. You owes a deal to me, Governor. Now, don't you, eh?" "Look here, my man," I said. "I've been taking you for a ghost these 5 years past. Now just tell me how you got in and out of my room that night, will you?" He laughed. "A ghost?" he said. "Well, if that ain't a good un. Why, easy enough, Governor. I was a lodging for a day or two in the same house. It's easy enough, when you know how, to open a door very quiet, and to slip out, too." He had been hiding in the attic. He had simply been playing a trick on me. I explained what Light-Toed Jim had said about Barksy Bill being a ghost. "Aye," he said. "You see, 'twas this way. It weren't Jim's fault, as I wasn't dead. He tried to murder me, Governor, he did, and left me a-lying for dead. So I says to myself when I comes round that I'd pay him out sooner or later. But after that, I quit the profession. Jim's nasty conduct having made me sick of it. So I went in for honest work at my old trade, which was draining and pipe repairing. I was on a job of that sort in Westford, near Miss Singleton's house, When I see Light-Toed Jim, I had a idea what he was up to, haven't heard of the plate, and I watches him 1 or 2 nights and gets a notion how he was going to work the job. Then, of course, you being a officer and close at hand, I splits on him, and that's all. He had been a genuine informant, not a ghost. He had seen me as a promising young detective and had decided to help me out. I had been wrong. It was a good lesson learned. Never underestimate the unexpected, and always look up as well as down. The end. If you like the story, hit that like button and subscribe for more videos. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Was there anything that surprised you? Who's your favorite character in the story? I can't wait to hear your thoughts.